The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, joins me now live from Westminster. Good to talk to you this morning, sir. Let's just start straight away with the Zaporozhye nuclear plant and the attack on it. We have heard just now from the Ministry of Defence that radiation levels are normal, but how concerned are you about the fact that this plant was hit? Do you think it was targeted, or was this just part of warfare?
Well, at the very least, it was clearly a reckless bombardment of a very sensitive and precarious and dangerous facility. And the fact that the Russians kept bombarding it after there was the fire and the Ukrainian emergency rescue team were trying to get to that makes it doubly reprehensible. The Prime Minister's been very clear on this. He's called for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council in New York in order to ramp up the pressure on these appalling tactics that we're seeing from the Kremlin, but also to make sure we're supporting the Ukrainian government in any way we can.
Does this perhaps suggest to you that President Putin is serious about nuclear war?
I think the way I would read it is that the early part of his military campaign has stuttered and stumbled. It's not been as effective. I think there's been a lot of pushback amongst the Russians that this isn't what they had expected. This isn't what he'd sold. He'd said it would be a cakewalk into Ukraine. That clearly hasn't happened. And he's responding with ever more heavy-handed and brutal tactics. And that is also, I think, a reflection of the fact that the international community has been more resolute than perhaps he'd expected with the concerted package of sanctions, which has had a very initially very powerful impact on, for example, the Russian ruble, the Russian stock market. They've had to double interest rates. So we will continue to starve the finances that fund Putin's war machine and support the Ukrainians in their courageous defence against this illegal invasion.
But whilst it may well be impacting on some Russians, it doesn't seem to be changing President Putin's mind any, does it?
Well, it won't happen overnight. We need to keep up the pressure, which is why we're taking the actions that we're taking. But it has had an immediate impact. And of course, and we need to show the strategic stamina to see this through in Ukraine. And of course, it is dawning on many, whether it's the conscripts who are out there in Ukraine, told that they were a peacekeeping force, facing fearsome resistance, receiving illegal orders to attack civilian targets, which could end up seeing them in the dock of a court or even in prison for war crimes. And of course, those who are bankrolling Putin are being hit where it hurts as well. But you're right to say it's not going to happen overnight. I think we need to get set for a much longer, protracted crisis in Ukraine, and we'll need to have the stamina with our international partners for that.
Are you concerned about President Putin's state of mind?
I think it's clearly irrational, and even if I looked at it through the narrowest Russian perspective, clearly counterproductive to Russian interests. And you can see that in the economic consequences, and I believe you'll see that in the casualties that they're taking and will continue to take. I've got no idea, I'm not a psychiatrist, but it is clearly irrational and counterproductive for Russians, let alone the impact, the horrific impact it's having on the people of Ukraine and the wider nervousness we've all got now around regional security.
How concerned are you about President Zelensky in Ukraine, and what help can the UK give to him? Because he has become such a galvanising figure, quite an inspirational figure inside Ukraine. We know that he has been targeted by Russian forces. If he were to be attacked, or if he was forced to leave, what impact do you think that would have on the conflict?
Well, we know that the Russian playbook has involved targeted assassinations. We've seen that in the streets of Salisbury in 2018. So I think we do need to support President Zelensky in every way we can. Of course, we give him advice, and we'll be careful about divulging too much of that. But we also give him military hardware. We've given his troops training under Operation Orbital, and there's a massive package of economic and humanitarian support for him as well. So we won't go into too much of some of the finer details of it, but we are willing to do whatever it takes to support the Ukrainian defence and indeed the president in what is a very courageous stance that he's taking.
What does that mean?
I just explained to you what it involves.
You won't give us any more details on exactly what the UK is sending to help Ukrainians on this front?
We've provided anti-tank hardware. We're continuing and willing to provide other military hardware to allow Ukrainians to defend themselves. We provided humanitarian assistance on top of the economic assistance to deal with, obviously, the energy pressures that they will face. And we will look across the board at what else we can do. We're going to support the International Criminal Court. The chief prosecutor, I believe, is going to Ukraine. If we can support that accountability, and it's critical that evidence of war crimes is preserved so that those responsible right across the chain of command can be held accountable. So from war crimes through to humanitarian assistance, through to the hardware to defend the streets and the cities of Ukraine, we will provide whatever we can. And of course, the most important thing is to work with our allies to make it as effective as possible.
You mentioned sanctions. Let's go back to them. France and Germany have already started seizing oligarchs' yachts. Shouldn't we be seizing property, as Tom Tugendhat has suggested?
Well, we have got sanctions on over 100 entities. You've seen 2 individuals, Usmanov and Shuvalov, overnight. But what we're doing is making sure we take the most effective measures. We need evidence to seize property. And just to give you one illustration, because it's been put about that we're slow or we're lagging behind, actually, we've sanctioned more Russian banks than the EU, including the biggest Russian bank, Sberbank. We've prevented millions of Russian companies from being listed in the UK or raising loans in the UK. And we will look carefully at how we can expedite and strengthen all the powers that we've got. So just to give you 2 examples, on Monday we're going to be putting through at pace the Economic Crimes Bill, which will strengthen the unexplained wealth orders and create greater transparency around who owns foreign-owned companies, who is the ultimate owner, in order for us to take faster and more effective measures. But we've got one of the most robust and rigorous sanctions regimes in the world. We do need to have a legal basis and evidence to take those measures, otherwise you end up tripping up, and that just gives a propaganda coup to whoever we want to target. And of course, I would also just say, we're not targeting all international finance coming into the UK. We want to be open to that. We're not targeting blanket Russian money. We are targeting the corrupt, the kleptocrats, and those linked to Putin and his war machine. And it's very important that we are targeted in what we do, because that's the most effective way to increase the squeeze on Vladimir Putin and his war machine.
Back in 2010, the Conservative government changed the visa system to encourage more high net worth individuals to come into the UK. In hindsight, do you think that that was possibly an error, that possibly has led to a blind eye being turned to some Russian money that perhaps shouldn't have done coming into the UK?
Well, the Home Secretary has already dealt with the Tier 1 visas, and it's true to say that we want to be open to business and open to international investment. It's part of our USP in global Britain, but at the same time, we have led the way in taking targeted sanctions. Just to give you 2 further illustrations, particularly relevant to Russia, as Foreign Secretary, I introduced the Sergei Magnitsky sanction regime for human rights abuses, asset freezes and visa bans, and we extended it to corruption. So we have been at the vanguard of striking this balance between being an open economy but not allowing dirty money and those with blood on their hands to place their assets here, and we're strengthening that even further.
Okay, good to talk to you, Dominic Raab. Thanks very much for joining us today.